Hello everyone, welcome to the IR Current Affairs lecture once again. We are going to discuss today the West Asian crisis, which has been going on since that war broke out on 20th of February. We are a couple of months down the line ever since the war started, and we have that advantage of hindsight. We can look back and analyze what has happened with much more dimensions as compared to, say, in the immediate aftermath of the war. Uh, Now we would discuss all the dimensions of the war, which is in a very different situation right now. There is neither ceasefire nor continuation of the war. What I would call is a sort of uncomfortable pause in the war. It may resume again, it may head towards ceasefire talks. We are not yet sure about what outcome we would witness in coming days. So it's uncomfortable kind of pause in the war, which has created highly volatile kind of situation. This war and the crisis has got global implications. There's no doubt about that. Let us try to cover as many dimensions as possible. Let us discuss the West Asian crisis, which is a sort of defining moment in contemporary global politics. Uh, let's look at what all things we are going to discuss as part of this lecture. We will talk about intensification of West Asian crisis and global reactions. That is the core theme of the lecture. And key developments, I would talk about latest key developments, what has happened. And then we would talk about Houthi joining the war, another non-state actor joining the war. Who are Houthis? We would talk about. Then Pakistan's efforts, right, in terms of bringing peace. So Islamabad Diplomatic Summit, China-Pakistan 5-point peace initiative we would talk about, right? Japan-France summit we would talk about, how it is linked to it. Global energy crisis, US-NATO tensions as part of the implications of this crisis. India's diplomatic and strategic moves, what is India's response to the war so far. Developments in the month of April, what has happened in the month of April, right? Ceasefire efforts and everything. Then concluding remarks. And in the end, I would talk about how to add PSR dimension to the whole topic, right? Let's begin with the context. What is the current context that we are observing right now? The context is Iran, US, Israel conflict continued to intensify toward the end of March, drawing wider global reactions. So we would cover the month of March first, and then I would come to the month of April, right? So what are the key developments in the month of March? Continued military exchanges, proxy escalations in the West. When we say proxy, it's about axis of resistance. It includes Hezbollah, Hamas, right? And as I mentioned, while taking overview of what all things we are going to discuss in this lecture, I also mentioned Houthis. So these are non-state actors. So on one hand, military exchanges between these countries. On the other hand, proxy escalation in West Asia. UN Security Council, UNSC held discussions on ceasefire and regional stability. But that is not going to yield any kind of result, particularly when a veto power is involved in the war itself. That is the United States. Several countries called for de-escalation and humanitarian corridors. Most of the countries have been talking about these two aspects, but the war did not stop in the month of March. Oil markets remained volatile due to uncertainty in the Gulf region, right? It goes without saying because around 20% of the oil trade passes through Strait of Hormuz. And when Strait of Hormuz is in trouble, the entire global oil market gets impacted. The prices have surged like anything. Trump's shifting signals on ceasefire. Donald Trump, he is living up to his reputation, right? He carries a lot of uncertainty. He would say something in the morning and he would say exactly opposite in the evening. And next day he won't remember what he has said in the last day, morning or evening, right? Shifting signals on ceasefire. Trump announced that he was postponing any strikes against Iran's power plants for 5 days, citing productive conversations with Tehran. He said we are having talks with the high officials of Tehran. And Tehran squarely rejected any talks. That's very interesting. On one hand, President Trump saying that we have talks with Iran, and Iran saying that we don't have any kind of talks with Donald Trump, right? Iran responded by saying that there had been no direct talks, and Trump's move was designed to lower energy prices and buy time for his military plans. So Iran says that this is a tactic employed by Trump. He is just saying that for the sake of saying it, so that because of his statements, at least oil prices could come down and he can buy time for his military plans, because Iran, in a way, has responded in a manner that Trump never expected. Trump expected that he would bring about regime change in few days, right? That has not happened. The deep state, IRGC, has prevented any kind of such possibility, right? So, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi signaled Tehran's willingness to keep fighting. Tehran has clearly stated that we are going to fight this war. We are not surrendering, right? Earlier, Trump had told reporters he was not interested in a ceasefire. On one hand, he says that we are going for ceasefire, signals on ceasefire. Then he says we are not going for ceasefire. Then he says we would decimate Iran. Then he says we have talks with Iran, right? You don't do a ceasefire when you are literally obliterating the other side. When you're literally destroying Iran, you won't talk about ceasefire. He talks about such things every now and then. He would say something now and he would say exactly opposite the other day, right? So his statements are quite contradictory. The US 15-point peace plan. US envoy Steve Witkoff confirmed the US had presented a 15-point action list forming framework for peace deal, which mediator Pakistan gave to Iran. This is the older development, earlier development, that is in the month of March. It's a different matter. The talks were held in Pakistan. We will talk about that the month of April, right? Iran countered with its own 5 conditions, and Iran is still firm on those 5 conditions. So Iran did not accept 15-point plan of US, and instead they came up with their own 5 points, right? 5 conditions, including war reparations and rights over Strait of Hormuz. Among those 5 conditions, 2 crucial conditions are this. We are entitled to war reparations. What is war reparation? Compensation, right, for the loss in the war, and rights over Strait of Hormuz, right? Trump's prime time address, March 31. Again, Trump comes back with some statements. Trump hailed the US military's unstoppable prowess and told Americans the conflict now is entering in the second month, will end shortly without offering definite timeline. We would end the war shortly. What is that shortly? Nobody knows. There is no time frame as to when this war is going to end based on the talks of Donald Trump, right? He also claimed Iran's president had asked for a ceasefire. Iran flatly denied it. This is very bizarre kind of, behavior on the part of the US president. He says something that I am in talks with Iranian people. Iranian people say that they don't have any kind of direct talks with Donald Trump. Donald Trump says that Iranian president asked for ceasefire. Iran says we did not ask for it, right? US military built up. An amphibious task force of about 3,500 US Marines and sailors, right, led by USS Tripoli, arrived in the Gulf. Another 2,200 Marines and 2,000 soldiers. So it's a military built up by US. It clearly indicates that war is far from over. Iran is far from surrender, and neither there is chance of ceasefire. The kind of military build up that we are seeing in this region is indicative of what? More and more forces required to handle the situation in West Asia. Another important implication of this would be the attention of US from Indo-Pacific may shift, or rather it has shifted to West Asia. That could be a major implication considering India, right? One more dimension. Houthis joined the war. Sanjay Kumar Pandey, a foreign policy analyst, highlighted the strategic escalation in the ongoing conflict in West Asia. It has entered critical phase with the involvement of Houthis of Yemen, transforming a regional war into a global economic and strategic crisis. So Houthis have been in control of Yemen, a large part of it, ever since the Jasmine Revolution happened, right? Who are Houthis? Let's talk about that briefly, right? It's a Shia militant group representing Yemen's Zaydi Shia minority. It's a Shia militant group. So that means it has got to connect with Iran, right? Formerly known as Ansar Allah, or Partisans of God. Initially, it was called Ansar Allah, Partisans of God. Later on, they were called Houthis, founded by Hussein al-Houthi, and hence this is called Houthi group. Initially emerged in 1990s as a rebellion against Yemen's central government. So it was a rebel group. It was a rebel group. When Jasmine Revolution happened, Arab Spring, that is called, in 2011-12, in different countries like Libya, Egypt, Yemen for that matter, right? Syria. Different rebel groups emerged They challenged the governments. So one of them was Houthis in Yemen, right? Following Arab Spring in 2011, the Houthis were able to capture large parts of Yemen. So right now they are in control of a large part of Yemen from where they operate, including the capital city of Sana'a, and they continue to control significant portions of the country, particularly along a Red Sea coastline. That is another important dimension, because right now the war is choking the marine routes, and that has got global implications for the world economy, right? Over time, Houthis have become closely aligned with Iran. Obviously, Shia group, Shia country, Iran, and Iran has been cultivating axis of resistance since 2011. Important component of Iran's axis of resistance. So now it includes three non-state actors: Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis. So that is axis of resistance along with Iran, right? Okay, so now Houthis entering the war. The developments highlight vulnerability of a key maritime choke points, such as Strait of Hormuz, which has been already choked, and then Bab el-Mandab Strait. So another strait in trouble if Houthis continue the war, right? Let us talk about this strait, Bab el-Mandab Strait. Connects the Mediterranean Sea to Indian Ocean through Red Sea. Now this is very important connectivity point, because that takes us to Europe. And how important connectivity has become, everybody knows that. And BRI has increased the significance of connectivity projects a lot, right? So that comes in trouble. Facilitates about 10 to 12% of the global trade. So Strait of Hormuz accounts for 20% of the global oil trade. And this accounts for 10 to 12% of global trade in general, right? So passage between Yemen and Horn of Africa is vital for shipping routes connecting Asia and Europe via Suez Canal. So this could also come in trouble. So these are important connectivity points. And if these points come in the middle of war, crisis, that is going to have devastating impact on the global economy. So historically referred to as Gate of Tears and even Strait of Death, this one, right? It should not become again the Strait of Death, right? That is what we can hope for. So in the ongoing conflict, Houthis have actively targeted Israel and commercial shipping in the Red Sea through missiles and drone attacks. Similar kind of modus operandi that we see by Iran in Strait of Hormuz. So we see that by Houthis in this strait, Bab el-Mandab. Between late 2023 and early 2025, this sort of background of Houthis, they launched numerous attacks on Israel and over 100 merchant vessels, claiming solidarity with the Palestinian cause, right? So they have been doing this, and they have become active again because of the ongoing conflict. However, recent attacks have also targeted ships without clear links to Israel. Initially, their focus was on Israel, right? They were anti-Israel, but now they are attacking everything that is coming in the strait, right? That is escalating tensions further. Notably, ships with Indian connections, couple of names are there, were attacked, highlighting the direct risks posed to Indian citizens and economic interest. So these developments have direct implications for India's national interest and even Indian citizens. So these developments underline widening scope of the conflict and its spillover into international waters, right? Involvement of Houthis has definitely expanded conflict into the Red Sea and thereby internationalizing its impact. We are talking about this war when the war is paused. You may think that then why are we talking about all these things? It may again begin. So there is volatile situation. You may again witness escalation in the war. And even if there is no escalation in the future, this could be a potent topic for the current affairs for mains this year or the mains in 2027, right? In response, US has launched multinational naval operation called Operation Prosperity Guardian to safeguard shipping routes. Donald Trump has been appealing number of countries, particularly NATO allies, to join the war and ensure that the Strait of Hormuz is opened, right? So multinational kind of operation, Operation Prosperity. However, the response from regional powers has been mixed, right? That is what is the core topic of this lecture. How different powers have responded to the ongoing conflict in West Asia. Let's look at that. We are talking about regional powers as of now. Saudi Arabia has remained cautious because of their ongoing talks, negotiations with Houthis. For Saudi, that is a neighborhood problem, and Saudi doesn't want to hurt Houthis so that again they become a nuisance for Saudi Arabia. When the talks are going on with Houthis, directly engaging with them in conflict is not affordable for Saudi Arabia, and that is why they have been cautious in this case. Egypt, despite being economically affected due to reduced Suez Canal traffic, has not strongly opposed the Houthis. Again, for the same reason, why to create a nuisance in the neighborhood, right? So they are having their own interest based on which their response has been cautious one. Now let us talk about Pakistan's efforts to bring peace in the region, right? So Pakistan's Islamabad Diplomatic Summit, March 29. Foreign Ministers of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt and Pakistan met in Islamabad on March 29. And this is second meeting in 2 weeks, right? So these 4 countries came together to discuss the way out from this crisis, right? Pakistan's Foreign Minister Dar confirmed both US and Iran had expressed confidence in Pakistan to facilitate direct talks. Pakistan's Foreign Minister says that both the warring countries are comfortable with Pakistan mediating for ceasefire, right? So there would be a kind of summit in the coming days. That is what Foreign Minister Dar said in the month of March, and that meeting happened in the month of April, but it did not lead to any kind of tangible outcome. Before the meeting, Pakistan's PM Shehbaz Sharif held 90-minute call with the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, briefing him on Islamabad's diplomatic outreach to US. So we can approach US, right? We can approach you as well. You both can come on table and negotiate rather than continuing the war, which is not affordable to either party. US Secretary General Antonio Guterres also expressed support for Pakistan's efforts. Anybody who can bring peace is welcome. That is the outlook of UN Secretary General, right? Just a moment, I think there is some glitch. I would reopen the document that can help us continue the lecture. Just a moment. Yeah. Okay, so Pakistan's efforts to mediate and bring peace, right? So that is one aspect, one development in the month of March. Next, China-Pakistan 5-point peace initiative. This was significant diplomatic development because this effort involves a major power. Pakistan is not a major power, we know that very well. But China is a major power. When China and Russia come in, that adds a different dimension to the whole effort. So significant diplomatic development because a key global power formally stated pathway to end the war. A key global power is saying that we have a pathway, we have a proposal which can end the war, right? Pakistani FM Ishaq Dar visited Beijing to discuss the crisis. He paid a visit to Beijing, right? How we can defuse this crisis. After meeting Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, China and Pakistan unveiled their initiative to restore peace and stability, and that proposal is 5-point initiative. What are those points? What these 2 countries are proposing? An immediate cessation of hostilities, that is 1. Allowing humanitarian assistance to go there. 2nd, start up peace talks as soon as possible. 3rd, all parties refrain from use of force during peace talks. When you come for the peace talks on the table, you should not attack each other. And precisely this happened in the next month, in the month of April. In Pakistan, Islamabad, when these both countries were planning to meet, right, when that process was going on, Israel attacked Lebanon. And that made Iran very uncomfortable and absolutely pessimistic about the outcome of Islamabad talks. So that's how it's a valid point. If you keep on attacking each other while peace talks are going on, peace talks would be futile, right? Number 4, an immediate halt to attacks on critical infrastructure, including energy, desalination plants, and power facilities. One of the important dimensions of the ongoing war has been deliberate attacks on infrastructure, both military and civil infrastructure. This is with an intention to cripple the infra of the enemy country so that the country collapses easily. So that is adopted by both the sides. That is a war strategy adopted by both sides. So economic tools, right, are increasingly being used as military tools right? So infra attacks must stop. That is point number 4. Point number 5, safe passage of civilian ships and restoration of normal transit through the Strait of Hormuz. These are 5 points that China and Pakistan came up with. Obviously not accepted, and nothing happened on these 5 points. Another important implication, Japan-France summit. French President Emmanuel Macron met Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi in Tokyo. They said both nations believe in international law, international order, and democratic values, and both advocated return to peace, ceasefire, calm, free passage through Strait of Hormuz. I said that in the beginning. Almost all the countries have been talking about this. De-escalate the conflict, bring peace, open the Strait of Hormuz, and let the global trade happen, right? Takaichi said that they agreed on importance of quickly de-escalating the conflict and agreed to deepen the cooperation in defense, rare earths, nuclear energy, and space. So this is getting impacted, the developmental aspect, and we must stop the war as early as possible. Now, one important point to note here is France is part of NATO alliance, right? And despite that, France is not coming forward in supporting Donald Trump's policy here, right? Okay, global energy crisis and NATO tensions. Trump blasted NATO allies for the simple reason, right? He was expecting that NATO allies would come forward and support his scheme of things. But you look at the French president, you look at UK, you look at other countries. Spain has been very open in criticizing US, right? So that's how most of the NATO allies look like not supporting US, and that's why Trump has lost his temper. So they declined his request to help US reopen Strait of Hormuz. Their standpoint is we don't want to get entangled, involved into the war, right? That is the opinion of other NATO allies. Spain refused to let the US use its airspace or jointly operate military bases for the conflict, while German defense minister said it was not our war. So all the NATO allies departing away from what Donald Trump expects from them, right? EU Energy Commissioner warned that oil and gas prices in Europe are unlikely to return to normal anytime soon, even if the Iran war ended immediately. That's very correct kind of analysis, right? International Energy Agency already has been trying hard to reduce the increasing prices, and that's organization in news you should prepare a note for, right? So EU Energy Commissioner has clearly stated, which is absolutely right factually, that even if the war stops, it would take some time, considerable time, to bring back the oil prices to normalcy, pre-war prices rather. So oil prices surged past $110 per barrel, Brent crude oil price. Now in the month of April, it has gone beyond 125. So very high kind of price, more than the double what was the price before the war, right? So WTO issued warning on projecting the global trade growth to slow to 1.9% for 2026 due to this tension. So global implications clearly of the war. Now, India's diplomatic and strategic moves, how India is handling this situation. India continued diplomatic outreach in West Asia to safeguard its interest and try hard to reduce the escalations, right? But somehow that has not happened. We are just trying to safeguard our national interest, Indian diaspora, our ships carrying oil, right? India engaged in high-level talks with Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel, with a focus on ensuring safety of Indian diaspora and energy supply continuity. So that has been India's stand, which is a policy towards West Asia since long. We never get entangled into the regional conflict. Our focus always is on our own national interest, without getting involved into the regional conflict, regional power equations. Just ensure that the countries on both sides do not harm our national interest. That's the kind of policy that we are witnessing. India reiterated its position: dialogue over military escalation, respect for sovereignty and stability. We should prefer dialogue. We should try to de-escalate the situation and respect sovereignty of each country and stability. Another important policy response of India, considering this crisis, is diversification, right? We need to diversify our energy sources. We cannot rely on one country, right? Uranium deal with Canada is an example of it. A major diplomatic breakthrough. India and Canada finalized $1.9 billion uranium supply agreement. So this is significant because recently India-Canada relations are quite strained. And in the backdrop of strained relations, this looks like a diplomatic reset for both the countries. And this diplomatic reset comes in the context of global volatility. Neither Canada nor India can afford to continue the strained relations in the given volatile context, right? With roughly 700 Indian seafarers trapped and 10 million diaspora members in the Gulf, India shifted its focus to higher Russian oil imports to bypass Hormuz halt. So we are reaching out to Canada, we are reaching out to Russia. So these are the efforts to diversify our sources of energy. Another initiative domestically India has taken is the relief scheme. India launched resilience and logistics intervention for export facilitation. It's a scheme with this outlay, 497 crore rupees, to support exporters facing skyrocketing insurance and logistics costs due to war. So because of war, insurance companies have increased their charges a lot, which is eating into the profits of businesses. And to give them some kind of relief, this scheme is launched by India. Now, let's talk about developments in the month of April. The conflict witnessed intense military escalations in early part of April. So sustained airstrikes by both the parties, right? Key feature has been this one. I have talked about this. So this war focused on crippling, destroying the infra backbone of the adversary. That has been an instrument of war that is witnessed in this crisis. Strait of Hormuz emerged as central theater of strategic confrontation. This has been the case ever since the war started, but in the month of April, something else was seen. And what is that? Dual blockade. What is dual blockade? As far as Strait of Hormuz is concerned, right, it is something like that. This is blocked by Iran, and this is ocean. So at the ocean level, US is blocking it. So it's dual block now, dual blockade. Both US and Iran are blocking the Strait of Hormuz, right? That is called dual blockade, and that's a cause of concern for global economy, right? The global economy, right? Okay. Now, ceasefire and diplomatic efforts. Amid escalating tensions, a temporary ceasefire agreement was reached through mediation by Pakistan. It proved to be very, very brief kind of a ceasefire, temporary ceasefire, right? The agreement included provisions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, halting the hostilities for a limited period. And this also did not happen. It was for limited period, but on that topic as well, there were differences, right? However, the ceasefire remained fragile and was marked by continued violations, including attacks in Lebanon and ongoing naval confrontations. So this was cited by Iran for lack of trustworthiness, right? As far as other parties are concerned. While US and Iran are going for ceasefire talks, Israel attacks Lebanon. And Israel said that this is a different theater. We should not connect that with the ongoing Iran war. Iran says these are all connected incidents. You are attacking Lebanon, and that is not acceptable. All the attacks should stop for ceasefire talks to yield something tangible. And then subsequent negotiations between US and Iran failed to produce a lasting agreement, with both sides maintaining hardline positions. JD Vance and Iranian president held talks that failed. Even subsequent efforts failed. And both the countries are maintaining their hardline position. Every day they issue statements which are not very conducive for any kind of ceasefire talks. United States continued to pressure Iran through economic and military means. And Iran, in response, insisted on preserving its nuclear missile capabilities as national assets. We need to understand this. This is the most important objective of US. US wants Iran to stop this. And Iran considers it as national asset. We are not going to compromise on that. So unless there is any kind of concrete compromise on this topic, ceasefire is not going to happen. If the war stops, it's a pause, right? If the war stops for a longer period of time, that's because both sides are exhausted economically, right? Let's conclude this entire discussion. So in conclusion, this conflict represents critical challenge to global peace and, most importantly, economic stability, right? That is one takeaway that we have. Second, Strait of Hormuz crisis and imposition of naval blockades have amplified the conflict's global impact. It's not about war between two countries. They're actually blocking the global trade routes. right? And supply chains get impacted, and then it causes inflation and entire economy comes in trouble, right? While temporary ceasefires offer brief relief, absence of comprehensive diplomatic solution continues to pose risk of further escalation. I have been pointing this out since beginning. Though there is a pause, it's uncomfortable pause. And it's uncomfortable because there is no sustained diplomatic kind of engagement on both sides of the war, right? Situation highlights urgent need for sustained diplomatic engagement and multilateral efforts to ensure stability in West Asia. This is one thing between Iran, US, and Israel, and other countries have to come in with serious efforts in order to diffuse the tension. That is what we can conclude as of now, as far as West Asia crisis is concerned. Let's briefly talk about how you can add PSR dimension, how you can add the theoretical part while answering such kind of questions. So, current crisis highlight the vulnerability of global trade to disruptions in the key maritime choke points. It also demonstrates how non-state actors like Houthis can significantly influence global geopolitics and economic stability. So, generally, IR has been statist, right? And realism always says that non-state actors are insignificant actors, but that this development goes against it. We have to take into consideration the role of non-state actors. That is one aspect, right? Second, such developments cannot be seen through strictly statist perspective of realism. That is what I was explaining, right? And we have to factor in the non-state actors. Kenneth Walt's 3 levels of analysis framework can be used to analyze current crisis. You can add multiple factors at 3 levels. I have picked up one factor each at 3 levels, right? So for example, US intention to consolidate its hegemony in West Asia is a global systemic level factor. For example, Israel-Iran rivalry and proxies of Iran kya hai? Regional systemic level factor, right? While deep state IRGC, right, in Iran is a national level factor in Iran. Because of this deep state national level factor, US could not achieve its objective of regime change in Iran quickly, right? And Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu are individual leadership level factors which have in a way caused this war, right? That is second way in which you can add PSR dimension, right? Third, the coordinated US-Israel attack on Iran without authorization by the UNSC. So how idealism takes a backseat when global powers assert themselves, right? And international institutions look quite important given the power politics that we observe at the international level. So without authorization by UNSC or prior approval by US Congress and in the breach of war powers resolution of 1973. All these factors clearly tell us that this attack of US on Iran lacks even modicum of legal justification. So neither US domestic laws, legislature, nor international laws are followed by the US. In the blatant violation of these legal provisions, this act has taken place, and that's why there is no modicum of legal justification. This underlines realist argument that weakness of international organizations derives from the fact that international politics continues to be characterized by quest for power amongst all states, and more importantly, through pursuit of relative gains. So all states look for relative gains. Absolute gains is not something that nation states are satisfied with. Though liberalism underlines the significance of absolute gains, it's relative gains that matters. What I got rather than what I got in comparison with somebody else. That's how nation states look at their engagement in different countries. And that's why pursuit of relative gains and then quest for power through it has caused this kind of crisis in West Asia. So that is PSR dimension that we have, right? So this is what I wanted to discuss with all of you. That was probably covered most of the dimensions of the war. So that's it on this topic for now. Thank you.